Hey, I'm Sahan from Details Pro, and this video is going to be the most basic, most beginner friendly, no stupid questions, everything's going to be explained video about what SwiftUI is at all, why there's a design app that uses SwiftUI, like, what's going on here, and then how do you actually be productive and make beautiful designs that look natural on these beautiful platforms with all these beautiful interface guidelines. It's a lot of the word beautiful, I know, but let's get started. Let's just start at the very beginning. So just right off the top, we got to talk about some nomenclature. So what is Swift, what is SwiftUI, and what is Details Pro in all these different contexts. So let's start from the sort of the foundation and then go to the things that are built on top of those foundations. So Swift is a programming language. It's a programming language developed open source by Apple, replaced Objective-C. Basically, I think it was 2015 when it came out, but app developers who were starting new projects starting from 2015 to today have basically been programming a lot in Swift. Honestly, like most of them, the vast majority start projects with Swift. That's the language of choice. Some developers still develop with Objective-C if they have projects that have been around a long time, but that's for developers. SwiftUI is, again, still for developers. So we haven't gotten to designers yet, but we're going to get there because that's what this is all for. So SwiftUI came out, I think last year. Basically, what Apple did was they updated the way that developers put together the visual parts of apps. There's a lot more to it than that, but essentially, after last year, actually coding up an app that had like a scrolling list on it or had buttons, like all of those parts that are interactive, the paradigm and the frameworks that developers had as their latest and greatest option became updated. So it became newer, it became a little bit easier. Of course, there's some rough edges because it's a brand new thing and the existing tools have been around for like a decade or 2 decades or whatever. So that's what SwiftUI is. So SwiftUI is the building blocks. It's like the Legos that developers use Swift with, like to write. But there's Swift, which is programming language. SwiftUI, which stands for Swift User Interface, right, is the interface building blocks to use with Swift. So all this stuff. What is Details Pro? So Details Pro is an app that I work on. I'm the developer, the designer. I'm sort of like the reason Details Pro is around. And the thinking, like, why does this exist and what does it do? Swift and SwiftUI made the lives of developers a lot easier. In my opinion, Details Pro is going to make the lives of designers easier because SwiftUI, although it made it easier for developers to make apps that look right, with less effort, a lot of designers still don't really engage with it in any way directly because the primary interface for using SwiftUI is code. So if you want to write SwiftUI code, it's not your normal Swift code. It's not like, the hardest programming in the world, but at the end of the day, you are still writing Swift code. So there's a lot of little things that you will need to know as a designer, as somebody who wants to use SwiftUI to do stuff with it. So long story short, Details Pro is my answer to how can designers' lives be made easier with all this that's happened over here. So now let's get into Details Pro and let's design something from scratch. So you may be familiar, if you're a designer, you want to mock up an app, or if you do this professionally and you've been around the block, you're probably familiar with any one of these apps. Photoshop, Sketch, Figma, Adobe XD, Framer. I'm leaving out a bunch, but there's so many design tools, and all of them are pretty great, right? You can really make really slick designs with them, and primarily you work with an interface where you drag things around and you put them on top of each other and you make your app, and then you kind of go to the next artboard and you make another screen and you do those screens. So Details Pro is supposed to be a design tool. So it's supposed to be an app that you use in conjunction with whatever apps you use to design apps. And And it's supposed to be used in the exploratory phase. Like, I personally am so smitten or like just charmed by all of the little things that change in the interface of these platforms year to year. I feel like no font weight changing, no font size change, like none of those things go unnoticed. I don't notice everything, of course, but like I love noticing these things. I love when people bring them up or they show me something that I haven't seen. So that part of the process I have a lot of respect for. So basically what the goal of Details Pro is, in a nutshell, is to make it easier for you to design an original design that's destined for one of these platforms by harnessing the power of SwiftUI. So that what I was talking about earlier, where using SwiftUI normally takes coding chops, Details Pro takes that out. So you do not need coding chops. You don't need to know how to program. You don't need to know how to write Swift. You don't even need a Mac with Xcode to put together real SwiftUI. Granted, Details Pro is still really early, and I don't think it's even been out for a month when I'm recording this, but there's a lot that you can do with it. So I'm going to show you how does this work. So this is going to be our end target. If you see this large widget with the cute dog, and it's sort of a fictitious photo memory thing. But I'm going to go ahead and delete that, and we're just going to start from the very beginning. So what the heck is going on? So here is Details Pro. On the left side, you've got your editing area. And on the right side, you've got your preview area. So in a traditional design tool, you point and click on each element and you drag them around into the positions that they're supposed to be in. Details Pro tries to ride the SwiftUI river like way more intensely than I think anyone sort of, maybe has ever tried before. So this is going to be a little different, and I'm going to explain how this works and how it's helpful. It's maybe slower in some ways, maybe faster in some other ways. So thank you for watching this far and for having a little bit of belief. So in this design tool, you won't be clicking and dragging things around. You'll be using the editing area to build it, kind of like Lego bricks, right? So, and you'll see what that design turns into on the right. So let's just go ahead and start. Let's just put something, just like the simplest thing, the traditional hello world. So in SwiftUI, there are different kinds of layers in a design tool, there are different kinds of views in SwiftUI. So text is one of them. And I'm sure you can imagine with text, you can change what the words are, you can change the font, you can change the color, the lines, all that stuff. But the thing that's interesting about SwiftUI is that by default, these things kind of push on each other, right? So if you had, let's say you wanted to make a design that was like a profile picture and then a name and a share button to like share someone's profile. Like without having to set up anything, the way SwiftUI naturally works is that it lays those things out by figuring out what the size of each thing is and arranging them. So if somebody's name is 10 letters long, the share button will be here. If someone's name is 30 letters long, then the icon will move, right? There's a physicality to these things, like they exist in horizontals or in verticals or in Z's and in all sorts of other like grids. There's all sorts of things here. But this is sort of the thing this is where I'm getting into, like, it's a superpower if you can design like this, because you won't need to spend too much time like faking the stuff that normally happens in an app, right? Where, oh, if this paragraph is actually 2 paragraphs longer, we wanted to push this down. So like this stuff is built in. So as you get into that, you want to think about how the different design elements in your design take up space. There are some elements that I'm going to refer to as greedy, meaning they, let's say given the whole iPhone screen, a red rectangle will, not that it has to be red, just any rectangle view will fill up all the space that it can. So it would take up the whole screen. Whereas this hello world is actually not very greedy at all. It's only taking up the little box that text takes up. And I'm going to demonstrate this right now real quick, just what I told you with the rectangle and with the text. So how am I going to do that? I'm going to reference the size. You're going to see how big it is. And And I'm going to explain what's going on here in a second. But I'm just going to add a background color to this text. And let's just say it is the color red. So notice if I say that text should have a background, it's just around hello world. That's it. But let me delete this. And let's just add as our only design element a single rectangle and watch what's going to happen. Boom. Took up everything, right? So that's, we'll get into more of this stuff, but just try to be aware of which elements take up space in different ways, right? So back to our widget. So SwiftUI is hierarchical, or it's a tree, or I mean, I think it's a tree technically, but what I mean by that is the technical terms all amount to, you have design elements, and some of them can contain other design elements, and some of them don't, right? It's like one of those dolls where you can like put things, you can put them inside and you open it up and there's more in there, right? And who knows, that one could contain another one. So that is all set up for you in this editing area. So again, just going really slowly. When I add text, that's sort of all there is. There's text. I could add another text under it, and there it is, right? And let's just go hello, and let's call this one goodbye. So goodbye and then hello. Hello and then goodbye. By default, DetailsPro at the top level uses something called a vertical stack. So you might probably notice that in this picker here. So what you could do, let me get rid of these. Actually, we'll keep them around. So there's hello and goodbye. Those don't have anything inside them besides their text. But there's other design elements like horizontal stacks, vertical stacks, layered stacks. Their entire job is just arranging other elements. In fact, they don't look like anything when you throw them on the page. So if I say, hey, I want a horizontal stack, like I don't see anything. I still see just hello, goodbye. But you'll notice in DetailsPro you have that little indent area waiting for you. So I can grab this hello and I can put it in there, and now it's in the horizontal stack. You see I can collapse it and expand it, and I can put goodbye in there and watch what's going to happen. So what's happening here is, and think about it from the outside to the inside. It's like we've got a vertical stack. Okay, what do we got next? We got a horizontal stack. Okay, what do we got next? We've got text. So as that happens, I don't know which order this stuff happens in, but when you have the horizontal stack, it lays out its contents horizontally. Go figure. So, but these, it's pretty, actually, like really interesting. I've asked some of my friends who aren't even designers or developers to, when I give them, we talk about horizontal stacks and vertical stacks just because I'm telling them what I'm working on. And I think they pick it up super quickly because it's pretty intuitive to take a UI and break it down into the vertical stacks or the horizontal stacks. Because you can slice it so many different ways. So there's a horizontal stack. Now let's get into what DetailsPro is doing here. So each one of those white bubbles on the left are a design element, and you can tap on them and get the inspector with all the controls, right? So text, for example, has a text field at the top, which you already saw. It also has room for modifiers, which all these design elements have. So let's get into modifiers. Modifiers are a SwiftUI thing. Basically, the fastest shortcut to just knowing what a modifier is it's the way you change the color of something, or the way you change the font, or the way you change anything. And there's a superpower here as well, which is that you could, so let's start with the font. I can go on hello and say, I could go in here in DetailsPro, you could look at all the modifiers available. I also try to make it a little helpful by surfacing the ones that are probably the ones you're going to use because they're so commonly used. So let's add a font modifier. Okay. So I was on hello. Font. So I'm going to go to text. I'll just change the text style. Let's just say it's title. So now hello is big. So I could do the same thing and add a modifier on goodbye. Or, and this is just so crazy, you could put, let me jump in there. and get rid of that. Or you could put a modifier on the stack, and then that becomes the modification to everything inside, unless something inside has a more specific claim to what the font is or the color is, right? So check this out. I'm just going to go on the horizontal stack and say, hey, let's use this modifier for this whole stack. Let's say everything in here. Let's make it a little bit more beautiful. Let's say it's actually serif, and it should be, you know, size 24. So if you notice, this hello has no modifier, this goodbye has no modifier, but the stack has a modifier. And this is all the magic of SwiftUI, right? Details Pro is just giving you this interface to work with these things and experience them without having to write code. So hats off to everyone who came up with this stuff, because this stuff is such a huge leap forward, in my opinion. It's incredible. But okay, so we know that there's design elements, we know that things take up sizes, we know that you can tap on these to add modifiers, and we know that some design elements like horizontal stacks just are expecting things to be placed inside them to be arranged, and you could, you know, have all these things like a horizontal stack which inside has a vertical stack which you can go back for as much as you want. So let's I suppose let's move on to just trying to make it look like what our first goal was. So to do that, I'm going to come over here on Details Pro and change to an actual size. So let's say the large widget. Okay, and actually before we get too carried away with that part, I'm going to blow my own mind again with maybe the magic character that makes this whole thing work, which is the spacer. So I showed you how text is really not greedy, right, in sizing. So if I go, you know, let me give hello a background color again, and let's say this background is orange. So there's hello. Hello's only taking up that much space. So when the background is applied, it's only applied to that. Now, I'm curious what you might be thinking, but as a little just like self-test or a little fun quiz, what do you think is going to happen when I add a background color to the horizontal stack? Just try to imagine. I'm going to add a green background color to the horizontal stack. Imagine how much green you think you're going to see. Here we go, moment of truth. So horizontal stack also is not looking very greedy right now, right? Horizontal stack is just saying, I'm as big as the things that I've got, and I've got two texts that are not that greedy at all. So I guess I'm just the two of those. And by the way, how is this stuff in the middle of the page? That is the default behavior of SwiftUI. It's like things become, I don't know how to say it perfectly technically, but by default, a view placed inside another view that is, you know, just like smaller than the other view is just centered, which is a total dream because you want to do that kind of all the time. But so anyway, back to this. Horizontal stack does not take up any more space. So the one other design element I need to introduce you to before we continue and start actually trying to make something look beautiful is the spacer. The spacer just takes up the available space in the axis of the stack after everything else in the stack has taken up its space. Sounds a little wordy. I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to put a spacer between hello and goodbye. Again, another like fun self-quiz moment. Try to imagine what's going to happen. Here comes a spacer in between hello and goodbye. And let me get rid of that orange background here. So what happens is the horizontal stack goes, okay, what do we got? We've got the horizontal stack looks, and it's like, I've got this large widget that we were in. So we kind of have all this space to work with. What do we got? Hello is like, I'm this big. Goodbye is like, I'm this big. And then the spacer goes, I got the rest. That's like actually exactly what it's like. The spacer's like, I got the rest. So, so there's that. So you can move the spacer at the end of them. This is a super common tactic here, to push things over, or to say, you know, this has got to be aligned on this side. So I can put the spacer there, so it's hello and then goodbye, and then a spacer. Or put it over here, and it's spacer, hello, goodbye. I wonder if anybody knows what would happen if I put in 2 spacers. If we do this right now, the spacers share. Like by default, they split what's over. So I hope you can kind of start to imagine like you can use these things to position things, so generic, but you can position things in a way with these simple tools. You just combine them and you put them together and you're right in the river of SwiftUI, and you're using a lot of smart defaults and you're making your design. So now let's get into making that widget. So I'm gonna clear our canvas here. Okay, so the photos in this fictitious world we got to design a widget for some sort of photos memories app. So we just want to surface a photo that somebody might care about and show a little caption with maybe what this kind of memory is or when it's from or whatever. So our design had a picture of a dog and then it had text sort of down in the corner. So there's a few ways we could do this. I'm going to show you guys the optimal way that I would do it, and there'll probably be some hops along the way of introducing new things, and we'll totally do that. So the first thing is we saw vertical stack and horizontal stack. Layered stack, which by the way, if you ever heard of a Z stack, they're the same thing. I just called it layered stacks. I thought that'd be a little more simple. A layered stack lets you put things on top of each other, over each other, right? Vertical is always going to try to arrange them or arrange them, but never let them kind of overlap. So we definitely need some overlap here because we got text over an image. Now, if you follow this thread again, the layered stack, just like a horizontal stack, has no size, right? If I say, what's your background, or give me a red background for this layered stack, you don't see anything because the layered stack doesn't have anything inside of it that's taking up any space. So, kind of a neat trick. I don't know, I use this a lot. It might be a bad practice, but it hasn't bitten me yet. I use rectangles to take up space when I want a layered stack to grow. So we want the photo to take over this whole thing, right? So I'm just going to do a rectangle. And then there's a bunch of different ways to do this, but a really safe way when you want to make sure that you don't have... actually, well, let me just get into it and you'll see what I'm talking about. So so this rectangle is in there, but I'm just going to turn the opacity down on it. So it's really just going to be an invisible rectangle. But luckily it's still going to take up space for us. So if I say, hey, this layered stack now has a background color, which by the way, I use background colors all the time to understand, how something works or like what its size is. Now we can see that yellow because that layered stack is putting that rectangle in. The rectangle is taking up all the space. Granted, its opacity is 0, so we don't really see anything, but there is that background color. So that layered stack takes up all that space. So I'm going to pop in here and actually, instead of a background color, let's do a background image to get that picture of the dog. So one cool thing about DetailsPro is that you can import photos that you use in your designs and you can use them over and over again really easily. That came from realizing that a lot of designers work on the same kind of design work for the stretch of a project. So why re-import the same picture into multiple files? But here's that picture. You notice I wanted to fill it instead of fit it. So now we've got this layered stack that's got a background, which is the dog, and it's also stretching horizontally and vertically to take up that space with that rectangle. So now we want to put that little text that's like, photo memory last Friday on there. So let's just get started with this. So if I put text over here, it's a little faint, but there it is, right? It's layered stack, rectangle text. It's in the center again, because that's all the space it takes up, and the layered stack puts it in the middle. We want it to actually be further down. So I'm going to start a new stack with this item, and let's start a vertical stack. Okay, still nothing. That's because we're missing our hero, the spacer. So I'm just going to throw a spacer above the text. And I don't know if you saw what just happened, but it just got pushed down. Let me undo that so you can watch the animation. It was there, and then now with that spacer, it gets shot down. if we move this here, it's going to blast up, right? So like the spacer is super essential. But so there's that. Let me go ahead and make it white, and I'm just going to make everything inside the vertical stack white, because we're going to add other text in a second, and I don't want to do that, 5 times. So let's just go down here and click on white. And let's change the font. Let's say, let's add a modifier and say the font is, I don't know, headline. Cool. Okay, so right now we've got our vertical stack. I hope it's like gelling how this is happening. Layered stack with a vertical stack with a spacer that takes up all that space and then text that gets down there. I want to move this text into the bottom left corner, so we are in this case going to employ a horizontal stack as well. So the way that we'll do that is by just taking the text one more time and putting it into a stack that's horizontal. Again, nothing's happening without a spacer taking up that rest of that space. And here, let's do a spacer. Boom, so now it's in the corner. You'll notice it's like super deep in the corner, so we want a little bit of padding. There is a SwiftUI modifier. So far we've used font, background color, background image, and just like normal text color and rectangle color, they're all the same. So we're about to learn about a new modifier called padding. So I'm just going to go onto the entire vertical stack and say, basically once we get past this picture of the dog, everything else in that layer needs to be padded. So I'm going to add padding. So there's that. SwiftUI does have default padding as an option when you add padding. So I believe it's actually platform dependent. So if you do it for an iPhone app versus a watch app versus an iPad app, it will do smart padding kind of based on what the system is like design-wise. But in our case, I know from the docs, from the human interface guidelines, that we want to be, I believe it's 16 points. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, for this padding, which is not on just one of the sides, it's on the entire, around the whole thing, let's just pad with 16 points. And you can see if I wanted to delete that, I could just go like this, and then if you wanted to undo, I can undo up here. So pretty forgiving. You can explore and do that kind of thing. But yeah, okay, so we've got our text. It's in the bottom left corner through the vertical stack getting down and the horizontal stack getting over. Now let's add another line under that hello world that says that, oh actually let me change this. Let's say this is supposed to say like photo memory. And then let's add one other line under it that says last Friday. Ooh, okay, so it showed up on the right. So that makes total sense, right? Because it's in the horizontal stack. So the horizontal stack is going, well, let me put those things next to each other. So here we go, fun with stacks. I'm going to put that into another little vertical stack. Or sorry, we're going to put photo memory and last Friday into another vertical stack. Feel free to do as many stacks as you need. There's a lot of headroom here. It's not like a few stacks is going to mess SwiftUI up. So there's that. Now, one thing that is a little weird is it's not left aligned. Again, there's that centering default in SwiftUI. So we could use spacers again, but since we're in the situation where we've got a vertical stack that is the right size by itself, right? We've already pushed it over to the left. We don't need to do anything except left align the contents of the vertical stack. We can actually use one of the options for vertical stacks, which is alignment. Now, leading and trailing refer to a dynamic left or right, because in some languages, languages read left to right. Other languages read right to left. So when you use leading, it uses whichever one is the first, is the left or the right. Instead of always hard coding to left and then having to remember to switch automatically in a right to left language, or switch manually. So SwiftUI actually handles that for you by just letting you say, hey, I want it to be whatever's the leading edge. So there we go. So I changed that. So there is a design, right? It's built together with these Lego blocks. I don't know if I can even say Lego because it's such a trademarked thing. It's put together with these building blocks, and it looks like something. So if we just wanted to go crazy for a second, you could totally go, well, I don't know, maybe this should be on the top. Maybe it should be in the top right. Let me grab this and put it there. Oh, there we go. And granted, we could come in here and fix that alignment real quick. But you can see even just that was like pretty fluid, right? Pretty easy. I didn't have to click and drag things. Also, mind you, we can preview how this is going to look in other widget sizes. Let's say we want to do medium. So all that happened is in Details Pro, the design was set to a different size, and then SwiftUI did its magic inside with what we built. Looks okay, but doesn't look that great because our photo is cut off, so let's try small. Okay, looks like not great, but it's close because, I don't know, the font's maybe a little big, and maybe it would be better in the bottom, on the bottom, and on the right again. But yeah, I hope you can, and the padding, there's too much padding too. Or there's not too much padding, there's something else that's off. Maybe it's that we need a spacer here. Yeah, that looks like it pushed it over. That's good. And maybe let's make the font, let's go to a custom font. Let's do like, I don't know, 18? 17? Semi-bold. See, that's, so, I don't know the best practice in this case of what font size to use in a small widget, but I would love to know if anybody knows, please call it out. But yeah, I mean, you can see, it's like a really different, so it's different. And it's definitely not perfect for everything, or even better for everything yet, but it's better for some things, and it's pretty fast. So yeah, there are other things to dive into, like how Details Pro can let you export the SwiftUI code for what you see on the left. And actually now would be a good time to mention that everything that we've done here is available in the free version of Details Pro. So there is an optional upgrade which will give you the ability to export SwiftUI code from a design. It'll let you have more files at a time. It'll let you post to the Details Pro community, and in the future there's going to be some more advanced design elements that you'll be able to use that will be restricted to the optional upgrade, but all the stuff that you need to like actually design stuff is going to stay free. Because myself, I love using this app, and I don't want to give the free version, to people in a way that's incomplete. But yeah, so you can do all this for free. And the other thing you can do is you can preview designs in dark mode. You can there's a whole bunch of modifiers. I'll leave that for a more focused video. But yeah, so please feel free to ask any questions in the comments, and I'll do a follow-up, just like answering some Q&A. But yeah, I hope that was a helpful and informative first look at what SwiftUI is, what SwiftUI and Details Pro, how these things connect, and why Details Pro is a design app that claims to do design with SwiftUI. My goal is to make a tool that will help you make the most beautiful design the fastest, and also allow you to explore different designs, because that's such an important part of the process, that allow you to explore different designs the easiest. So yeah, thank you for watching. I look forward to your questions, and I hope you have a good day. Later.